Hello, here is Wolf. Today I want to talk about the characteristics of Shôtôkan Karate, the style I mainly practice. And we know that Shôtôkan has a long fighting distance, very long big techniques, lunge steps, deep stances, high kicks, jumps, and it is rather athletic. And thinking in terms of Chinese martial arts, it is a derivative of Shaolin boxing. It belongs to the long fist styles, and it is rather on the hard side, on the young side of martial crafts. And we want to shed light upon why Shôtôkan has been becoming a rather hard style, and go back into history. I'll name several factors. First, the transformation of a self-protection system into a physical education program. Then the militarization of karate, and then the influence from the swordsmanship, and later on the first competition format with the idea of the one decisive score, and the idea that power could be generated by physical tension of the muscles in an instant when focusing a technique. All these elements came together as a confluence and led to the hardening of Shôtôkan Karate. Let's go back to the first point. Long decades before karate came to the main island, it was already introduced into the school system at the beginning of the 20th century in Okinawa. And it was Itosu Anko, the teacher of Funakoshi Gichin, who was the main man behind this. And he actually wrote in a letter, which was later published as the 10 precepts to an education board, that karate should be taught already in elementary school in order to educate a strong youth. It would be for the benefit of the nation, and even for having fit young lads for the military service. And this kind of military ideology that was coming in also was seen in the way training was conducted, now in big groups, school classes, and collectively. And the first teachers were assistant teachers of Itosu, Yabukensu, and Hana Shirotomo. They were military men, they were officers, and now we had this Prussian drill in the whole training regime, which was of course transferred later to the main island. And karate spread in the 1920s, and particularly in the 1930s, and this was a time when Japan as a whole was preparing for war. And actually Taiji Kase spoke about the atmosphere in the Shôtôkan dojo in the 1940s, and it has been rather grave and somber. He told stories about people who came into the dojo with the idea that they want to learn bare-handed fighting for the emergency situation on the battlefield when you are facing an enemy and you have no weapon in your hand. So it was literally deadly serious, and it was Funakoshi Yoshitaka, or Funakoshi Gigo, the third son of Funakoshi Gichin, who actually made karate into a very athletic and very strong endeavor. And so this was the one point. Yeah, it was a very serious thing. And on top of that, some of the instructors of Shôtôkan Karate were employed by the Nakano military school to teach karate there. This was a school for counterintelligence and guerrilla warfare, and for a special unit. And Initially, it was Ueshiba Morihei who has taught Aikido there, and Aikido was seen as being too soft and not effective enough, so they called in the karate people. So the karate instructors had to show how effective their techniques are. So this gave it another lethal edge. It was even rumored that they were experimenting on prisoners of war to see how efficacious their punches and techniques would be. Well, and interestingly or ironically, it was also Egami Shigeru who taught in this school. And he realized that power could not only be generated by muscle and by force and by strength, but rather by fluid, relaxed movements that are not stopped, that are whipped out. And he actually was later kind of ostracized in the Shôtôkan community and built up his own federation, the Shôtokai, and he stressed the work with inner energy and spiritual elements. And with him, more or less, these fluid and flexible and relaxed and smooth ways to move were expelled from Shôtôkan Karate. So, this is one of the developments that we can see. The other big influence on Shôtôkan Karate is from swordsmanship, from Kenjutsu. This goes back to the Okinawan times, because the teacher of Itosu Anku, whom we also already mentioned, and also the teacher of Asato Anko, who of himself said, "I am better known as a master of the sword than one of the fairest." This teacher, Matsumura Sokon, was a renowned master in Jigen-ryu, a very aggressive swordsman style from the southern islands of Japan. And Jigen-ryu is well known for its very direct long-distance attacks, and for a training regime that was put into the... They trained 3,000 strikes on a pole in the morning and 8,000 strikes in the evening. At this enormously repetitive way of practicing with very few techniques was also later transferred into the practice of makiwara punching on the main island with hundreds and thousands of repetitions. By the way, the transformation from a self-defense system into the physical education system brought with it that many of the really lethal techniques and throwing, grappling or strangling, joint locks or cranking off the head and techniques with open hands and stuff was eliminated, and in order to make it acceptable for school children. And the technical repertoire was streamlined into very direct and hand and foot techniques and some defensive movements. Talking about defensive movements or receiving uke movements, many of the old Shôtôkan proponents, they thought that an uke should be extremely strong, done like an attack, in order to inflict so much pain to the opponent that he would refrain from further attacking. So we see that even in this respect, Shôtôkan Karate was extremely hard. And as far as the kumite is concerned, it was also streamlined along the extant old Budo disciplines on the main island, namely Judo and Kendo. And from Kendo we have this straight line attacks in karate, for instance, Gohon Kumite, where you pursue the opponent with 5 lunge steps, same technique, and you go straight back, which is strategically not very smart, but well, as a physical education it is tolerable. And the other thing that came from Kenjutsu was the idea of ken hi satsu. Yeah? And that means one strike, certain death. Yeah? And ikken, this can actually be written with the second character, with ken read as saber or sword, or ken written with the character for fist. So it's one fist strike or one sword strike, a certain kill. And this led, of course, to a form of practice where all the energy, everything was put into this one technique. And of course the slogan as such, with its kind of murderous intent, is not adequate anymore for our times, I would say. I mean, as a leading idea to explore and develop the most effective way how to strike, it is okay. But in the dojo, when we work with a partner, we should do it in a way that both profit, that both learn from each other, in an atmosphere of harmony, as Kanazawa Soke always called it. But this had a very decisive effect also when the first competition format was formulated, which was called Ippon Shobu. Ippon means one decisive score. Yeah? And in order to land this decisive punch or decisive technique, it had to be very strong, very sharp with regard to distance and timing. It had to be perfect. Yeah, it's not like in sports karate where you tap the head of the opponent and get a point. It was a really serious thing, and therefore everybody worked on very powerful techniques. And there was another thing, because of the rules, they meant to be done with sun dome. Sun is around 3 centimeters and dome is to stop. So the techniques had to be arrested, yeah, had to be stopped before contact or impact. And therefore this training led to very abrupt stopping, locking of the techniques. And from outsiders saw, or rather people from other styles saw, Shôtôkan as rather rigid and stiff and wooden because of that. Even in the way kata were performed, power was important to get high scores. So there was a kind of fixation on the end position of the technique, on the good outer shape that had to be shown. Yes, and rather than on the fluid motions and transitions between the movement. So we have the impression that kata were perceived not as a whole or a living entity or as a gestalt, but rather as a sequence of isolated movements. And this maybe came from the 3K training system that was introduced also with the introduction into schools. So in Okinawa the mainstay of training was kata, and these kata were now split up, and the techniques were isolated into singular units that could be trained. Also for competition, it is a few techniques that you hone through endless repetition in order to score. And this led to these very forceful ways of executing single techniques. And yes, therefore karate, or Shôtôkan Karate, became a little bit lopsided, so to say. It went more and more into this very strong direction. And now what I want to say is that karate is, to be frank, too much on the young side, and too much training of young style actually in the end is not really good for your health, the Chinese martial artists would say. So it does a good service to Shôtôkan when some yin, some softer, some smoother elements are brought in. Personally, I dabble in Okinawan Goju, Ryu, and where there is more evasive moves, sweeps, and many techniques that are not stopped, they're whipped out. And I do this not in order to mix styles or to change my style, but in order to improve Shotokan, to counterbalance it, to moderate it, to temper it. And particularly when we get older, we should concentrate on quality rather than quantity, on relaxation rather than tautness. A bit more softness is good. Physically, mentally relax, and it makes the whole style a little bit more gentle. And as it is often said in martial circles, the real strong master is kind, compassionate, and peaceful. And I would encourage us to strive for this ideal. So put a little bit yin into the yang, very strong yang of Shotokan is, I think, a good endeavor to make it more wholesome. And there are people out there who do that. Rick Houghton with Aikido, Kanazawa Hirokazu with Taiji Kwan, and Asai Tetsuhiko brought in White Crane Kung Fu. Nakatatsuya revived the hip vibration and things like that. So we see that Shotokan has developed and is always developing, and I think that this is a very good thing, and wish you good training, good health. So long.